Good afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon. Not a traditional morning.
So, welcome to another video.
We are on our way from Boston to the Black Sluice.
Wind is forecast, rain is forecast.
Yes.
There's a low high tide, which means we're leaving an hour or so before we were planning to. And
we suddenly got a call from the Boston lockkeeper saying, "Can you be here in half an hour?" Sure.
So we're on our way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit unplanned. Well, the whole thing was planned, but the time we're leaving is unplanned. So we might end up waiting for a little while outside the Black Sluice lock because the person who's driving up to actually operate the lock was arriving for 2, and now we're arriving after we get there. So
We'll just see what happens, I guess.
yeah.
Should be an adventure. Hopefully not too much of an adventure.
Too much of an adventure was we're on the North Sea in half an hour. This will not be too much.
Between the Canal and River Trust visitor moorings and the lock is Boston Gateway Marina. A large number of cruiser boats moor here, as well as a few narrowboats. To get to the Black Sluice Navigation, also known as the South 40-foot Drain, we need to travel through the Boston Grand Sluice, often just called Boston Lock. This will take us onto the tidal River Witham for a mile of the section known historically as the Haven, before we turn right into the Black Sluice itself. When the level of the falling tide water outside the lock reaches the height of the non-tidal section of the River Witham, both sets of gates will be opened and we can travel straight through. The lockkeeper Ali got us here nice and early so we don't miss the tide, as we only have a short window of time for the passage. Oh good, it started to rain just as we travelled through the Grand Sluice. Thankfully, Michael's prepared with his waterproofs on already. Just after we come onto the tidal section, we get a phone call from the lockkeeper on the Black Sluice. The lock's open and ready for us.
Sorry, what?
Just had a call from John. The lock is open and ready for us.
Okay, good.
This part of the river is actually really fascinating. So many relics from Boston's prosperous past as an important port town are visible from the water. I'm rather surprised to see these cruisers come under the bridge, but the lockkeeper had warned Michael that we might meet some boats coming upstream. Also, I didn't realise there'd be so many fishing boats that moored along here, although I guess it makes perfect sense, as this is a tidal river and we're so close to open water. This relatively sheltered area, where fresh water from the River Witham meets the salty tidal flow from the wash, has traditionally been known as the Haven. It runs for roughly 6 miles from the bottom of the Grand Sluice to the mouth at the wash. Ahead is the Boston Dock Swing Bridge, which connects a single-track railway of the Boston Port Docks to the Great Northern Line, allowing goods to cross the haven. The bridge was prefabricated at the foundry work and arrived partially assembled at Boston in November 1882. The dock was opened for business on the 15th of December 1884, and apparently the bridge still swings 5 times a week for steel traffic. Ahead, the river navigation continues round to the left and past the new Boston Tidal barrier, which was completed and opened just this year. To the right is the Black Sluice that will take us onto the south 40-foot drain. As previously arranged, the friendly EA staff have already got the gates open for us. It's a very welcome sight, even though we've only been on the tidal section for about 20 minutes. We get tied on to the riser rails inside the lock, and then the lockkeeper opens the sluices to drop us as the falling tide is still slightly above the drain's level. The south 40-foot drain has been used by boats for much of its history, but the lock at the Black Sluice fell into disrepair in the 1970s, and it wasn't until 2008 that it was restored and the drain could be used as a navigation again. Traffic on the navigation is still very low, however, so you do need to contact the EA to book your passage through the lock in advance. Whilst in the lock, we get a bit of a strange request from the lockkeeper. They've spotted one of their bollards floating in the lock. Presumably someone thought it was funny to chuck it in, so they ask if it's possible for us to fish it out. It's only made of plastic, but it's filled with water, making it fairly heavy. Needless to say, I get covered in river water as I bring it aboard. We make a quick stop on the lock landing, and there's a brief pause while Michael returns the bollard and purchases the Environment Agency nav key that will need to open locks and services on the navigations they control. Key in hand, we can start exploring the south 40-foot drain. The lockkeeper has informed us that we can go as far as Donington High Bridge, which doesn't look that far on the map, but is in fact a good 12 miles away. 12 miles composed of 2 more or less straight sections of relatively deep drain, the second section of which is considerably more narrow. Luckily there's a small sluice just above the bridge that will allow a 60-foot boat to turn.
Well, this is fun!
It's not that bad.
This is the point at which the north 40-foot drain empties into the south 40-foot drain. It originally drained into the River Witham near the current site of the Grand Sluice, but it was redirected here after that scheme proved inadequate. This is where the new Hammond Beck drains. As we continue along, we pass many drains and becks. After Wyburton High Bridge, there are what look like moorings, but there are no mooring signs posted, which is a shame because there's a Tesco and Lidl supermarket just up the slope, and they'd be very convenient. There appears to be a towpath along the blank of the navigation, but I would suggest picking a nicer day if you want to walk the route. At this stage I retreat inside, and even though it's mid-May, I decide that we're going to need a fire today to dry out and keep warm. After 12 miles there and back we will anyway. Did I mention that this navigation is very long and very straight? I deliver a hot chocolate to Michael. Excellent service, I'm sure you'll agree. Just before we pass under Hubbards Bridge Road, we pass by Hubbards Bridge railway station, which is on the Nottingham to Skegness line. There is a pub located here just up on the bank, which would make the moorings ahead ideal if Michael were ready to stop just yet. Being the only boat on the Navigation is a little weird, although it does mean we get our pick of mooring spots, and all the pontoons along here are excellent and look pretty much brand new. This one even has a water point and a pump out station. The first major attempt to drain the fenlands that form the Black Sluice area was made by the Earl of Lindsey in the 1630s in an attempt to reclaim 36,000 acres of marshy land for agricultural use. These lowlands were naturally subject to flooding and tidal overflows and therefore of little economic value. The Lindsey scheme included cutting the south 40-foot drain and building the first sluice on the site, probably known as Skirbeck Sluice. The scheme ran into violent opposition from local landowners and from those with hunting and fishing interests in the wetlands. The original sluice building was burned and abandoned for over a century, and its charred black remains gave the area their current name. Ahead is another option for mooring tonight. The mooring pontoons are floating and attached to riser rails as the level of the Navigation does change significantly, and apparently quite quickly when the pumps are running. Great Hale O meets the south 40-foot drain ahead at the brick pumping station, and after travelling in a straight line for 7 miles, it's pretty exciting that the Navigation makes a bend here. I come out to keep Michael company for a bit, but honestly, it's really miserable weather. Michael has resorted to wearing his DIY goggles to protect his eyes from the wind and the rain, but his ability to fake being cheerful is diminishing fast. As instructed, we turn in the drain just before Donington High Bridge. That's all 12 miles of the Black Sluice Navigation done. Now we head back to find one of the moorings. There's actually been at least 3 Black Sluices. The current complex was built in 1946 and includes both the lock and the now decommissioned pumping station beside it. The lock was considerably upgraded in 2008 as the initial work of the Fens Waterway link, a long-term project to improve navigation in Lincolnshire and Cambridgeshire. The plan is to eventually extend the Black Sluice Navigation all the way to the River Glen, which would be fantastic, but for the moment it's a bit of a dead-end journey. Over the centuries, various schemes have improved the drainage of the region. By the 18th century, water was being pumped by windmills driving enormous scoop wheels. These were replaced by coal-fired steam engines and then paraffin and diesel pumps. The current pumping stations are all electrically driven and have maintained the drainage at modern agricultural standards since the 1960s. At last the moorings come into sight. It's 7 p.m. and definitely time to call it a day.
So that's us having made it to the Swine's Head visitor moorings on the Black Sluice or 40-foot drain. We got soaking wet. We knew it when we were coming. The weather was not looking good. The weather was not good. But we made it as far as the Donington High Bridge, which is the end of navigation. We were able to turn around there after scaring a whole bunch of swans and basically chasing a bunch of birds all day. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Once you get onto the lock, you more or less just go straight past a couple of bridges, turn left, go straight past a couple of bridges, make it past a railway bridge, and then there's a road bridge there, and the end of navigation is marked with a sign up in the top corner, and there's like a small drain pump outflow, I think it is, maybe inflow, where you just drive in there and you turn around. It's a little bit hairy to turn around, but not too bad. Lots of wildlife. Really nice to see today. Weather not so good, though. Both of us got very cold. George got very wet. We all got very wet. So everything is now on a line drying in here. And yeah, well, at least we're moored up. We were hoping to go one more bridge further where there is a pub that is available, but we just got to the end of the limits. End of the navigation, end of the limits. Tomorrow morning we will get up. We will go all the way back to the lock, and we head back up to Boston. So, you know, good fun for that. Thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already. Subscribe to Minimalist Maximal Velocity if you want to get notifications. Click that bell.